Welcome to the English Epics channel, Kel Turner. There isn't much in my past worth remembering. An average man with average desires, a loving wife, a good job, children. My wonderful wife, Helen, seemed to share these interests. Or at least so I thought. This is a story about how I discovered that my wife and I didn't have as much in common as I had believed. It all began on a dark and stormy night. No, not quite. I've just always wanted to start a story that way. It actually began one evening, when I came home from work. My wife, Helen, was sitting on the couch in the living room watching TV. She turned it off as I walked in. I sniffed the air and didn't smell any food. What's going on? Do you want to go out somewhere tonight? Did you ask Kelsey? Kelsey is with your mother right now. I wanted to talk to you without any interruptions, Helen said. There was a sensual note in her voice, and I thought I was about to get lucky. She continued, I know I shouldn't bring up role play, but I just want you to know how much I enjoy it. I want us to regularly bring what we do on Wednesdays into our bedroom. What do you say, cowboy? She lifted her skirt, revealing all her beauty. I didn't know what to say except, what role play? Oh, I know you want to pretend to. Keep it a secret to make it more exciting, but you've spoiled me. I want more than once a week of our special kind of love, and I have one question I've been dying to ask. How do you make your size seem bigger during our special time together? Is it just the excitement? I was overcome with a sense of dread. Helen, I don't know anything about role play on Wednesdays, and I definitely don't know how to make myself bigger. Please explain to me what you're talking about. Helen also began to look shocked. Well, you know, Wednesdays at the Marquee Inn and Suites. That doesn't ring a bell. I shook my head. Oh, God. You emailed me about 6 weeks ago, saying you'd found a way to spice up our sex life. I was supposed to go to room 301 at the hotel, undress, put on the mask left on the nightstand, and lie on the bed. I wasn't supposed to move, even when you came in and tied me to the bed. After you made love to me, you untied me and left. I wasn't supposed to take off the mask until you were gone. We were supposed to pretend we were having an affair and keep it a secret from each other. It was meant to make our sex life much more exciting. You said we couldn't talk about it for a week. I couldn't believe how amazing it was. We had sex in ways we never had before. And like I said, your size seemed bigger than usual. I thought it was connected to the special thrill we felt imagining each other as a different lover. Oh, Kel, please tell me it was you, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Helen. I've never been to the Marquee, either with you or anyone else. You're telling me that I had sex with someone other than my husband 6 times. She ran to the bathroom, where she threw up. After composing herself, she returned to the living room, where I was sitting in complete shock. Kel, you have to forgive me. Honestly, I thought it was you. I was so happy. Now I feel like such an idiot. Someone tricked me. Damn, that's why he never spoke to me in the room. He wanted me to keep believing it was you. Oh, Kel, please tell me you forgive me. I don't know what to say. This just seems so strange. How could someone do this to us, and why? How could you be with him 6 times and not realize it wasn't me? I thought it was you. You did everything differently, but I assumed that was part of the role play. To do something new, something more sexual, more inventive than before. I think he's just more sensual than you. Well, maybe you need to figure out who this guy is. The one who's so much better than me in bed so you can become his wife, I said, starting to get angry. Don't talk to me like that. I want to find this guy. I want to cut off everything he has for what he did to me. Don't you understand that he essentially raped me? I calmed myself down. I'm really sorry, Helen. I wasn't looking at this from your perspective. Let's try to approach this logically, if we can. Who would want to do something like this to us? It has to be someone who truly hates me, you, or both of us. Or maybe it's someone who was secretly in love with you and figured out a way to sleep with you without convincing you to cheat on your husband. Helen trembled all over. I get chills at the thought that someone out there might be thinking about having sex with me every night. You mean besides me, of course. My attempt to lighten the mood backfired terribly. Idiot. You weren't the one who was assaulted. Sorry. Okay. Where did the email come from? It's a shame I didn't save the emails. The person who sent them told me to delete the messages. They were sent from your office email. So it has to be someone with access to my computer. I usually leave it on when I step away from my desk, even if it's just for a short time. The problem is that opens up dozens of possibilities. Is he still emailing you? Yes. He usually confirms our meeting before each time, hinting at what I can expect. He said he wants the anticipation to put me in a state of euphoria ahead of time. I had to delete that email and not respond. Now I understand why. Really? You enjoyed it? Yes, but remember, I thought I was having sex with you. Damn it, Kel. In my mind, I wasn't enjoying sex with another man. I was enjoying sex with you. Did he email about the upcoming Wednesday meeting? No, not yet. I'll write to him. I don't think you should respond to him by email. He gave me a phone number to leave a message in case I ever needed to cancel. I had to leave a message on it once. All right. For now, don't do anything. Let me know when he writes again. There was no sex in the Turner household that night or in the nights that followed. I couldn't bring myself to dip my wick where someone else had just been. Helen said she was afraid she might start imagining the sex she'd had with the other guy, which would make her feel like she was cheating on me, ruining the moment. We both agreed that we needed to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. On Monday, Helen received an email from the mysterious lover. She showed me the message when I came home from work. He confirmed that this Wednesday worked for him. He was planning to convince her to finally give him the key to her back door. Helen admitted to me that she had been considering this option as part of their new role-play activities. Until recently, she had thought this kind of sex was too big of a step. I told her to call him and leave a message saying he could get what he wanted. I wanted to make sure he showed up. On Tuesday afternoon, I went to the marquee and spoke with the receptionist. I asked if he would be on duty the next day. He confirmed it. I then asked him what it would take to gain access to the room my wife would be visiting tomorrow. He wasn't surprised, as it was obvious to him that the woman and man using the same room every week were not married. His response was $200. Wednesday arrived, and we were ready to catch this man. Helen entered the room and did everything, as usual. A few minutes later, I saw a man walk into the room. It was Richie Hammond, the creep from our office. He harassed every woman there, married or not. Of course, he was married with 2 kids. Betraying his family clearly wasn't a problem for him. He had often glanced at the photo of my wife on my desk and made several comments about how lucky I was to have such a sexy wife. Every time he came into my office, I felt like spraying Lysol everywhere after he left. I went to the receptionist to get a copy of the key to the room. He refused to give it to me. Sorry, man. I'm afraid of losing my job. The boss has been all over the staff, making sure no one lets anyone in except the person who paid. Afternoon delights are a big part of our business. Sorry, man. I was furious. I couldn't stop thinking about what might be happening in that room. Helen was supposed to act as she usually did, and I was supposed to burst in before anything happened. I was livid. If you don't give me the key, I'll kick the door down and call the police. Do you think your boss wants to deal with that? I got the key, but it was several minutes later than I should have entered the room. When I walked in, Richie was standing behind her. He froze. Helen hadn't seen me yet and was begging him to keep going, saying she was on the verge. Richie kept moving forward. I grabbed him by the hair and pulled him away. Helen looked disappointed until I untied her and removed her mask. Then she started crying. I told her to get dressed. Richie sat in one of the chairs. Surprisingly, he seemed completely relaxed, sitting there with his quickly deflating toy. Well, at least I got to smack her fine ass before you did, he said. I approached him with fire in my eyes. He simply pointed to the corner. A camera was set up on a tripod. Kel, you don't want to hurt me. I have video recordings of every session your wife and I had together. Do you really want me to release them? I think I could make a decent amount of money from certain unsavory websites. Of course, I could also send them for free to your friends and family, or we could just leave things as they are. I take her once a week, and you get her every other day. You bastard hand over the videos, and you'll never see my wife again. Or what? Or I'll... You can't think of anything that wouldn't humiliate you or brand your wife as an adulteress, can you? I'll kill you. Richie was already laughing. So, you're going to leave your wife and daughter without a husband and father? Without a source of income? Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a little tired of her now that I've had her. Here's what I'll do. I'll never contact her again. Of course, if she decides to call me, that's a different matter. A wide, very wide smile spread across his face. Helen got dressed, and we left. She was silent on the way home. As soon as we arrived, she ran into the house, went upstairs, and stayed in the shower for a very long time. I waited downstairs. When she finally came down, she suggested we talk after dinner. It was time to pick up Kelsey. Dinner was quiet, except for Kelsey's enthusiastic recounting of her day. She went to bed at 8:30. We sat at the kitchen table to make sure our daughter was asleep. What do we do now? Helen asked. I'm not entirely sure. If there were a way to get the videos, it would solve a lot of our problems. At this point, I don't see any other option besides breaking and entering, but who could we get to do that? If we go to the police, he'll just say you consented. He has videos that show you enjoyed it. Even if he's arrested, the recordings will be made public. We're stuck. Any ideas? No, I think we've crossed a line. Maybe we could try to put it all in the rearview mirror and move on with our lives? Are you okay with that? No revenge. I'm afraid anything we do will only make things worse. Let's just leave it. If we never talk about it again, it will fade with time. She left and went to bed. As had become usual lately, I didn't join her. 2 months had passed. Helen was pleasant and took care of all her usual household and child care duties. We typically didn't talk about anything at home except what involved Kelsey, schedules, or phone messages. Our sex life had become a matter of self-service. At the office, I tried to avoid Richie. Every time he glanced my way, he had that smug grin of a man who had cuckolded at me. Just another twist of the knife in my back. God, how I wanted to wipe that grin off his face with my fist. I couldn't stop thinking about how to get my revenge, and I never gave up on that goal. In the middle of one of my revenge daydreams, I got a call. It was the receptionist from this marquee. What do you want? Hey man, don't be mad at me. I've got some information that might be useful to you. Interested? No idea. What could possibly interest me right now? How about the fact that your wife and Richie are back to their old tricks? I tried to speak dispassionately, though inside, I was boiling. It's hard to believe. She hates him. And why would he go back to the marquee after getting caught there? I'm not at the marquee anymore. I'm working at the Red Roof on Kingston Road now. When I saw them, I asked the receptionist. I was covering for about them. He said they've been coming regularly for about a month, every Wednesday, same time. If you need proof, I can get it for you for, let's say, $500. To hell with both of you, my wife and you. I hung up. I wanted to cry, but I was too angry. Richie had said he would only continue if my wife called him. I remembered her comments about how much she enjoyed having sex with him. We'd never gone this long without intimacy before, and Helen didn't seem to feel deprived. Probably because she wasn't. The only thing I could do was leave. I packed the things I would normally take on a 3-day business trip. I headed to the nearest motel that wasn't the Marquee or the Red Roof and had a bar. I checked into the Holiday Inn Express and headed to the bar. I wasn't much of a drinker, so I asked the bartender to recommend something. He served me a Long Island iced tea. At first, I thought it was too weak, but by the second round, my opinion changed. A hellishly delayed buzz was setting in. I was well on my way to drowning in my sorrows when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Mind if I join you, Kel? I need to cry into my drink, too. I turned to see a tall woman with long, wavy, jet-black hair. She was stunning. Sorry, do I know you? I replied. Joan, Richie's wife, at least for now. We met at last year's Christmas party. I looked again. How could I forget such a beautiful woman? Did I just say that out loud? Joan laughed. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. How did you? Why are you? Are you always this eloquent? Let me explain. Today I found out about Richie's latest stunt with your wife. I paid the receptionist who called me $500 for proof. I've had enough. He's promised multiple times to stop, but I don't think it's possible. As for meeting you, it's purely a coincidence. I just needed to get out of the house and clear my head. My mom is watching my 2 kids. When I saw you and remembered you from the Christmas party, your expression seemed to match how I felt, so I came over. If you'd prefer to be alone, and no, please, join me. I'm just so surprised. I think we probably have a lot in common. What are you drinking? What are you having? A Long Island iced tea. Damn, I love that drink. I lost my virginity because of it. Damn it, get me a double. We spent a few hours talking and drinking. She was easy to talk to, and her wicked, irreverent sense of humor was incredibly attractive to me. Finally, she said, well, it's time to either get revenge or go to bed ourselves. What do you prefer? As much as I'd love to make love to you, I don't think I could do it well enough to be worthy of someone as special as you. That's the sweetest disappointment I've ever experienced. Believe me, this wasn't meant as an insult, and I really hate missing out on such a chance. If we ever make love, I'd want to be at my best. Even then, I'd worry if I were good enough for you. Damn it. I haven't even taken out the trash, and I feel like I'm falling in love again. I should have known better than to drink doubles. How about we have breakfast together tomorrow? I could call you, or if you're up. I have a better idea. Joan interrupted. What if we sleep together so we'll know when the other wakes up? Do you mean sleep together or sleep together? Just sleep. But I could be persuaded to exchange a little affection. I really don't want to sleep alone tonight. Neither do I. Your room or mine? I have a suite. I'm using his credit card. He owes me. I brought some of my things to her room. After finishing our nightly routines in the bathroom, we got into bed. Despite being naked, cuddling, and sharing soft kisses, we fell asleep within minutes. She woke up first and poked me in the ribs. Wake up, or I'll have to take advantage of your morning sighs. God, how I wanted to see her on top of me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still too early to commit to adultery, even though our spouses had already crossed that line. Over breakfast at the Waffle House next door, we grew more serious. We talked about our marriages. We both wanted to get rid of our spouses, and we both wanted revenge. The problem seemed to be figuring out how to divorce them without losing as much or more than they would. I really don't want to go back to that house. I'd be happy just leaving, with the kids and forgetting about him. How can you afford that? Won't he come after the kids or you? My family has money when I called them last night. They said they'd put $100,000 into my personal account to give me and the kids the means to start the divorce process somewhere else. Honestly, I prefer to just leave and let him deal with the divorce. Aren't your kids in school? Won't they miss their father? No, I homeschool them. And he only agreed to have kids because it was a condition for marrying me. After the second child, I had my tubes tied. I doubt they'll miss him much. I'm sure he won't miss them either. He doesn't spend much time with them and always complains if he's asked to watch them while I run out somewhere. I've known for quite a while that he probably married me just for my money. I don't care. I have 2 wonderful daughters from our marriage. My parents were never in a rush to give me or my brother money, but they helped us with the deposit on our house and similar things. They're not particularly fond of Richie. I hadn't thought about just leaving. Like you, I'm not too eager to go back to my house. Both our names are on the mortgage. Helen and Kelsey were never especially close. Kelsey was in poops, baby. I think Helen didn't want to put her career on hold for a few years. Kelsey has always been Daddy's girl, and I think Helen loves her, but I don't think she'd go to extraordinary lengths to get her back. She knows I'll take good care of her. You know, the more I think about it, the more I like the idea of just leaving. Joan asked me if it seems like the best option for both of us is to simply leave our spouses instead of dealing with a divorce. The question is, do we do it together? She looked into my eyes, and maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see, but it felt like there was love in her gaze. We've been together for 24 hours. Not exactly love at first sight, but damn close. It's crazy, but yes, I'd go with you, as long as I could take my daughter with me. I can't believe I'm saying this. I've never done anything this impulsive and this important at the same time. I do have one question. Where would we go? And would we tell anyone where we're going? Those are the first two questions, but we need to ask each other every question we can think of. Here's my initial plan. I have an aunt, Barbara, who owns a large cabin on Lake Champlain. She can no longer live there because of her health issues. If it's available, it would be perfect. A secluded cabin with plenty of rooms for the kids and for us. The setting is straight out of a National Geographic photo. It turned out the cabin was available. I spent the next few days at the hotel. I ignored messages from Helen after realizing she had figured out that I knew about her resuming her Wednesday dates with Richie. I left her one message. I need to get away for a while. I went to work and quit my job. My boss was upset but also understanding. He asked if Richie's firing would cause any issues with my plans regarding Helen. Apparently, my case wasn't the first one. I told him, go ahead. I asked him to wait until I was ready to leave. I would have loved to see Richie's face when he got the news, but that would have been too much. I went to our bank and withdrew nearly all the money from our joint accounts. Most of it went toward paying off the remaining balance on the mortgage. Despite her betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to take all of our money and assets. We had both contributed to the household expenses. With the house paid off, Helen would end up with about the same financial outcome as she would in a 50-50 divorce. If she needed money, she could always sell the house. I relinquished my interest in the house to make it easier for her. Then, I canceled the automatic payments for utilities and insurance. Her health insurance would lapse when I left my job. I also changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy to Kelsey. At night, Joan and I talked about what we needed to do to effectively disappear, how to minimize harm to our children, and what kind of future we might have together. We continued to avoid having sex. Emotions were already running high, and we didn't want our decision to leave our spouses to be based on physical intimacy between us. I'm not sure which of us was more frustrated. By the third day, we had concluded that our escape plan was feasible. The next day, while Helen was at work, I went home and took what I thought Kelsey and I would need most. I considered leaving a note. The only thing I could come up with was I hoped the sex with him was worth it. My last stop that day was Kelsey's school. I told them Kelsey had a doctor's appointment and apologized for not notifying them sooner. I told Kelsey we were going on a trip. Kelsey asked if Mom was coming. I told her not on this trip. Her calm reaction surprised me. Joan picked up her kids from her mother's house after they got back from school. By 5 p.m., we were on the road. Aunt Barb invited us to stay at the lake house. She had just finished renovating it and felt guilty about selling it. Lucky for us. We took 2 cars. Kelsey started out riding with me, but after a few stops where the 3 girls got to know each other, they began alternating, either all riding with me or all with Joan. By the time we reached the log cabin, Joan and I had lost the master bedroom. The girls insisted on sticking together as their newfound trio. Fortunately, one of the guest bedrooms was near the second bathroom and worked perfectly for Joan and me. One of Joan's daughters asked why Joan and I were sharing a bedroom when one of the other bedrooms was unoccupied. Joan told her that the room we were in was the grown-up bedroom. Her older daughter replied that adults usually have their own rooms. Kelsey agreed, adding that both girls had noticed their parents hadn't spent many nights together in recent months. Once the excitement of the day had settled, the kids went to bed, all 3 of them in one bed. Thankfully, it was king-sized. Joan and I each had a glass of wine. Barbara had gifted us a small wine cabinet as a housewarming present. Joan gave me a sly smile. So now that we've left our spouses, are you ready to prove how good you are in bed? Oh, damn. She remembered what I'd said that night at the Holiday Inn Express. I'm afraid I might have set your expectations too high when it comes to my bedroom. Skills. My ex-wife, it seems, was rather disappointed in that department. If she fell for my useless ex-husband, I don't put much stock in her judgment, whether in the sexual arena or anywhere else. Besides, I fully intend to have as much influence as possible on the quality of your performance. I hope you don't mind. A woman on top. My reaction quickly confirmed that I didn't mind at all. We headed to the grown-up bedroom and made love. I was pleasantly surprised at how different it was to love Joan compared to Helen. It was a good difference. She smelled different. I felt different. Everything tasted different. But most importantly, she experienced pleasure differently. I genuinely thought she might be having a seizure until she said, "Can you do that again?" Amazingly, I could. 4 times. That night, I went 4 rounds, a new record for me. I lost count of how many times she reached her peak. Well then, Joan remarked as we finally drifted off to sleep. I guess that answers the question of sexual compatibility. We snuggled close together. The next morning, we happily went shopping to stock up on food for ourselves and the kids. I thoroughly enjoyed grilling as often as the weather allowed. We didn't need much money, as Joan was still receiving a generous allowance from her parents, along with what little I had left after paying off the mortgage. No one, except Aunt Barb, knew where we were. Once she heard our stories, she had no problem keeping our secret, even from Joan's parents. Time passed, and Joan became the homeschool teacher for all 3 kids. I got a job as a handyman, learning as I went. I admit it was a lot of on-the-job training. The girls' questions about my wife and her husband, or whether they wanted to see them, became less frequent with each passing month. Before long, all 3 girls started calling us Mom and Dad. Life in the open air allowed them to fully embrace their adventurous spirits. Our nearest neighbor, Greta, had raised her own family in this environment and was happy to share advice with us. We needed it. She started as a friend but gradually became a grandmother figure to our kids. We asked her not to ask the children about their parents, as both Joan and I had gone through unpleasant divorces. She understood and agreed. From time to time, Joan and I talked about whether we should establish contact with our former lives. We were afraid that any contact could lead someone to us. Beyond Helen and Richie, we worried that the police might accuse us of kidnapping and/or fraud to avoid legal divorce and the division of assets. We decided to use the internet as a safer way to communicate. Greta agreed to have the internet installed at her house if we taught her how to use it. She wanted to write to her grandchildren. Spending time with our kids made her miss her own even more than before. We debated whether to tell Greta our true story. So far, we hadn't. Things were going so well that we were afraid to rock the boat. It took Greta a month to set up satellite TV with Wi-Fi. We showed her how to use email and Skype. Seeing her grandchildren live on video was something truly special for her. One day, while she took the girls to the lake, we went online to gather some information. We found a listing for the sale of my old house. Helen must have needed the money. A year after we left, Helen and Richie filed announcements for divorces, citing abandonment as the reason. Aunt Barbara told Joan that her parents had sent out their annual Christmas update for the year. Joan's mother had included a personal note in the letter to Barb, knowing that Joan and Barb were close. Barb suspected that Joan's mother had figured out where Joan was. The message was a warning to Barbara. Helen hadn't given up searching for Kel. She had hired a private investigator who had visited Joan's parents. The investigator was aware of Aunt Barbara. Joan's mother told Barbara to expect someone to come snooping around soon. She hadn't called because she was worried her calls might be monitored. Joan's mother had watched too many spy movies. Barbara advised Kel and Joan to hurry and take precautions. We didn't have enough money to make a big move, unless we were sure we'd have more money coming in soon after relocating. Instead of asking Joan's parents for help, I decided to take a chance and emailed my old boss to ask about job opportunities. He replied, mentioning that a private investigator had contacted him. My boss said he was angry that I hadn't given him a heads up before leaving, and he didn't care where I was now. Then he asked if I liked Flagstaff, Arizona. I told him I didn't. No, because I'd never been there. He said there was an opening for a branch manager position. He offered to set up an interview and assured me that I would get the job. I asked how he could guarantee that. He said his brother was the one hiring and had already tried to recruit 2 employees from my old office. We headed to Flagstaff. Along the way, I worried that becoming an employee would leave a trail that a skilled private investigator could follow. An idea struck me just before we crossed into Arizona. We booked a hotel room with 2 beds and let the girls enjoy some time in the pool. Joan did everything she could to calm my nerves. As promised by my former boss, his brother mainly wanted to know how soon I could start. I told him I needed to create an LLC and name my corporation something other than my own name. I explained that instead of hiring me as an employee, he would be contracting services through my company. Service contracts usually cost less than hiring full-time employees, so he agreed. We found a house in the desert. The environment was completely different, but the kids adapted quickly. I think they were happy to escape the cold winters we might have faced back where we came from. It took several months for the kids to settle in and a few more for Joan and me to start feeling safe again. On that fateful night, Joan and I were turning off the lights, getting ready for bed, when there was a knock at the door. At that hour, with no neighbors nearby, I felt suspicious. I grabbed my rifle and loaded it carefully. I looked through the peephole and saw that it was Helen. A flood of mixed emotions raced through my mind. My heart pounded wildly and my stomach churned. I called out to Joan, letting her know we had a visitor. I invited Helen inside just as Joan entered the room. "I assume this is Helen?" Joan asked. I nodded. Helen immediately spoke up. "I assume the kids are already asleep. I waited until you started turning off the lights. I didn't want to disturb them." "Yes, they've been asleep for about half an hour." "Good." "Damn, you're a hard man to reach." She smirked. "Let me put both of you at ease right away. I'm not here to cause trouble. After you left and Richie lost his job, he moved in with me. It didn't take me long to realize I'd traded a Mercedes for a Hugo. Don't get me wrong, I was drawn to him for the sex. And yes, he was good in bed. But a couple living together needs more than just sex. I gave him a deadline to find a job and contribute his share of the expenses. At first, he didn't believe me, but he got the message when a sheriff's deputy showed up and told him to leave or be arrested. I heard he found a job in another town. As for my life, I've gotten back on track with the help of a therapist. Since then, I've been able to maintain myself emotionally and financially pretty well. Private investigators aren't cheap. A year later, I filed for divorce because, by then, I already knew I'd lost you and Kelsey. As much as I wanted to handle things differently, I knew I had to move on. Filing the petition allowed me to set the terms of the divorce. I kept the few things of yours that were left. Honestly, I feel like I'm moving forward. In fact, I'm seeing someone now. And I have high hopes for him. At the very least, I'm confident I won't make the same mistake with him that I made with you. If you've moved on, Helen, why are you here? Not very polite for small talk, is it? Fine. The reason I'm here is closure. I fell into a deep depression. When I finally had time to be alone and reflect on what I had done, on what I had lost, I couldn't live at peace with myself without telling you how sorry I am and that I don't blame you one bit for what you did. I wanted to make sure you don't think it was your fault. I pray you don't hate me. I'd like to ask for your forgiveness, but I understand that's asking too much. Regardless, I want to apologize again. I hope you, Joan, and Kelsey are happy. That's all. Now I have closure. And what about Kelsey? Did you plan to see her? Are you planning to seek custody? I won't lie. At first, I hoped to at least get joint. custody. Over time, I realized that if she's adjusted to her new family, seeing me, or especially living with me, would likely do more harm than good. No matter how wonderful she is, I don't think I could handle raising her on my own without your help. If we saw each other now, we'd probably both feel emotions that would weigh on us for a long time. I just want to know how she's doing. Has she ever asked about me or shown any interest in me? How is she doing in school? None of the girls have asked about you or Richie, but we've certainly never forbidden them from doing so, Joan replied. We told them that you and Richie didn't want to be with us anymore, but that you wanted our new family to be happy. So far, they haven't expressed a desire to go back to you. But that doesn't mean they can't be interested in how you're doing. I feel pretty comfortable telling you that they've all adjusted well. Kelsey and my girls have become an inseparable trio of sweet little monsters. I homeschool her along with my daughters. She's testing 2 grades ahead of where she would be if she were in public school in most subjects. Helen, I can honestly say I love Kelsey just as much as my 2 biological children. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Have you 2 got married yet? I replied. No, we weren't sure if we were officially divorced. I thought as much. Well, I have a wedding gift for you. She handed over a folder. It's a copy of each of your divorce decrees, ready to be finalized. Her attempt at humor seemed more like an effort to keep herself from crying. Richie and I used the same divorce lawyer. Now you too can become a legal family if you want. You'll also notice that Richie and I have both signed over full custody of our children to you. You should be able to apply for adoption to make it official. After pausing to see Joan and me crying tears of joy at the good news, Helen said, I should go, and started toward the door. I reached out and took her hand. Through heavy tears, Helen whispered, Just let me go. I promise never to bother you. Again. If you ever need to tell me anything about Kelsey, you have my mobile number. I let her go, and she walked away. Joan went to get us each a glass of wine. We needed something to calm our nerves. For a while, we sat in silence. I looked at Joan, and after a few moments I saw her smile. So who's proposing to whom? Now I was smiling too. After careful consideration and deep reflection, I've decided that the first person to climax tonight will be the one to propose. We both ran to the bedroom. Epilogue. Helen drove far enough away that she was out of sight. Then she stopped and released the sob she'd been holding inside. Helen reflected on her situation. Her funds were nearly depleted by the time the private investigator reported success. The small amount of money she had left was less than $200. Helen's plan for meeting Kel had 2 possible outcomes. First, Helen might discover that Kel was unable to handle Kelsey without her. Either Joan wouldn't be with him or their relationship would have soured. Kel would forgive her, and she could return to Kel and Kelsey's lives, never leaving again. Even if they didn't remarry, it wouldn't matter. Her car was packed with everything she had left in anticipation of this possibility. The second outcome was that she would find Kel and Kelsey in good health. Perhaps he and Joan would be married, maybe even with a child of their own. In that case, she would say she had only come to bring closure, handing them the divorce decrees as a farewell gift. The second scenario was the hardest for her to accept, but she knew she had to prepare for it. Her plan for closure required her to leave the new family behind and reach the largest nearby city, where she could start her life over without fear of running into them. In a zippered pouch in the glove compartment were Kel's wedding ring, her own wedding rings and other jewelry she no longer needed. Pawning them would provide the money she needed for her new life. After she stopped crying, Helen got back on the road. Phoenix, here I come. Hey, maybe this is a sign from God. Maybe I can rise from the ashes too. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.